Hi, my name is Charles, and I'm the conductor of the Oakville Chamber Orchestra. Do you know what a conductor is? The conductor is the person who stands in front of the orchestra and waves their hands, or sometimes a small white stick called a baton, to help keep the musicians playing together. Most of the time you would see me, I would look like this. Or like this. But before any of that cool stuff can happen, I spend a lot of my time doing things like this. And even this. It takes a lot of work to lead an orchestra of musicians, and you know what? I had to learn all about music and how orchestras work before they would let me become the conductor. I also learned to play the piano and studied it for many years. All conductors know how to play at least one instrument. I learned to play a little bit, almost all of the instruments in the orchestra, so I can speak intelligently to the players when I'm leading rehearsal. I love working with the Oakville Chamber Orchestra, and so I was really happy when they asked me to speak to you today. So settle in and maybe grab a snack. Because for the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to teach you all about the amazing world of string playing. First off, do you know what a string instrument is? String instruments, sometimes called chordophones, are a very, very popular kind of musical instrument found all around the world. A string instrument is any musical instrument that features strings, wires, or other thin flexible parts that can be stretched, tightened, and then plucked, strummed, hit, or even bowed. I'll bet you could name a few right now if you really thought about it. Have you ever seen a guitar? Or a piano? Or what about a violin? Here in Canada, those instruments are very popular, and each of them makes sounds in different ways. The guitar strings are plucked or strummed. The pianos are hit when you press its keys, and the violins are usually played by pulling a bow across them. But did you also know there are many other string instruments around the world too? Like the kora from West Africa, which is strummed and plucked a bit like the guitar or the harp. Or the santur from India and Iran, which is hammered kind of like the piano. And of course the erhu from China, which has a bow that might remind you of the violins. It's no surprise that there are so many kinds of string instruments around the world because they make such beautiful sounds and are musically very versatile. Have you ever been to a symphony orchestra concert? Or maybe watched videos online? If so, then you know that the symphony orchestra can be really, really big, with 80 musicians or more all together on stage. The symphony features not only string instruments like the violin and cello, but also woodwinds like the flute and clarinet, brass instruments like the trumpet and trombone, and percussion instruments like the snare drum and cymbals. Our Oakville Chamber Orchestra is a much smaller version of this. The chamber orchestra has many of the same instruments, but consists of no more than half as many players as a full symphony, and even fewer than half. Both symphony and chamber orchestras have at their core something called a string orchestra, and the string orchestra is really just an expansion of what we called a string quartet. quintet just means a group of five, and the 5 string instruments in it are the double bass and the cello, the viola, and 2 violins. In these videos, I will be joined by 5 of my friends from the Oakville Chamber Orchestra, playing together as a string quintet. Everyone knows that families can look very diverse, which means they're not all the same. Maybe some of your friends have a bunch of brothers and sisters, while you only have one or even none. Maybe you live with a mom and dad, but your best friend lives with her grandmother. Well, you can think of the string quartet kind of like its own special family. Maybe the cello and double bass are like a mother and father team. They are the biggest, tend to have the lowest voices, and they aren't often in a big hurry, if you know what I mean. The violins are kind of like the babies of the family. They are the smallest, have very high voices, and are always running around the place. But watch out when they cry, you might want to cover your ears. And what about the viola? Think about the viola like the older teenage sister, a bit bigger and more mature with a deeper voice than the violin babies, but not quite as big and deep as the grown-up cello and bass. The point is, the string quintet is a tight-knit, happy family, and they're obviously related. They're all made from wood and feature many of the same parts, like the scroll, pegs, fingerboard, strings, bridge, and a hollow body. They can all use a wooden bow to create sound, and while they produce unique sounds, you can hear how they are related to each other. But make no mistake, they also have their unique features and strengths, which make the whole string quintet family stronger. As the smallest members of the string quintet, the violins usually play higher, faster, and more frequently than the other musicians in the string orchestra. Just like the babies of the family, they need a lot of attention and enjoy the spotlight. The violin can be played standing or sitting, although usually in the string quintet they sit on chairs. It is held under the chin using a small support called a chin rest, and many players also use a shoulder rest clipped onto the back. The melody or main tune of a song can often be found in the violins, and there is a great deal of music written for the instrument. The bigger viola shares almost all the same parts as the violin. It too is played standing up or sitting down, and is held between the shoulder and the chin. But, because the viola is a little larger, its voice is pitched lower than the violin's, and features a unique, mellow sound that is truly uniquely beautiful. Most often, you can find the viola playing a supportive role, which means when the violins finally pass the tune along to the viola, there is much rejoicing. Sadly, there is not nearly as much music written just for viola as there is for violin, an oversight which the world's composers must correct as soon as possible. The cello is even larger than the viola and is almost exclusively played sitting down. Since it is not held under the chin, it doesn't have a chin rest like the viola, but features an adjustable end pin, which supports the instrument as it rests on the ground between the player's legs. The cello has a very large range of notes it can play, from very low to very high. Many people say that the cello's sound is closest to the human voice out of all the orchestra instruments, and composers tend to gift it equally frequently with the tune and accompaniment parts. And finally, the double bass is the largest and lowest pitched instrument in the entire string orchestra. The bass is most often played standing up, although there are special tall stools that some players use. It uses an adjustable end pin like the cello, and, for obvious, potentially painful reasons, it lacks the chin rest used by the violin and the viola. Just look at the enormous double bass, you might think that it's very heavy, until you realize that it is made mostly of air. Its body is a very thin wooden shell and not at all as heavy as it looks. Together, the tight-knit string quintet family blends its different voices to cover the full range of the string orchestra. Did you ever sing in a choir? In many ways, the string quintet is like a choir. Usually the first violin is the soprano, the second violin is the alto, the viola is the tenor, and the cello and bass, the basses of course. Together they all create beautiful, rich harmonies and wonderful soaring melodies. I'm going to conduct this piece because it has a lot of different changes of tempo, and that's one of the things a conductor can help a group of musicians with. Thanks so much for listening in today. My friends and I had a great time putting this together, and we can't wait to share the next one with you, which is all about the different kinds of sounds that can be created with string instruments. It's sure to be a blast, and I hope you can make it. See you next time.